Well, good morning, everyone. Another glorious morning. Absolutely beautiful. On the earlier part of my walk this morning, the sun was out a little bit more than it is now. There's a little bit of a fog bank moving in, but when I left the house, looking out the picture window in our living room, just with the angle of the sun and my perspective, I could see the ice crystals falling, just sintering their way down through the atmosphere. And all of these fields have this nice coating of fresh crystals, and the sun is sparkling amongst them. And some small birds here, but on the earlier part of my walk, there was some killdeer in the background singing. It's fantastic, just absolutely beautiful. As it kind of always is, it's one thing about it. Nature is abundant, and kind of in all things. Some of it you might not want, but that's the way it is. I uploaded a video a couple days ago, and I wanted to clarify a couple of things from that video. It was a rather general video about the nature of our political situation. It's kind of a 30,000 foot view, right? Like talking about the motives behind leaders in the media and questioning those motives. And I made a few statements there. It was my position, my opinion. And I had a couple of comments, both from Overnator and the Space Frog, sort of accusing me of being unclear and of being vague. And so I wanted to clarify my comments to clarify and I guess sort of respond to those comments in a video form rather than through responding to the comments, because it gets really clunky and you get misinterpreted and everything else. So to clarify, no, I was not being unclear and I was not being vague. I said what I intended to say. And that being said, of course, and I'd made this comment to the Space Frog and just got a snide response in return. I was taking a walk, this was not, it wasn't scripted video. I'm speaking extemporaneously. This is a guy who was going for a walk, who was thinking some things and thought, maybe I'll share my thoughts. I don't think they're actually particularly earth-shattering thoughts. They're not original thoughts, really. But just sort of a compilation of positions that I hold, essentially. And, maybe it should be noted, maybe it doesn't matter, but neither of these two subscribers, who've both been with me for a long time, have content on their channels. Maybe they got another channel and they upload content, but, am I being vague if I just leave that there and not sort of explain the reason why I'm pointing that out? I sort of feel like treat someone with a little bit of respect who, shares on the internet like that. Maybe I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. We'll get back to the clarifications here. But yeah, it was extemporaneous speech. And yet, when it comes to what I was trying to share, I did say the things I intended to say. There was nothing couched or hidden. I watched the video back and trying to figure out, because Overnator seemed to think that I was referring specifically to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Space Frog didn't say anything like that, just said I was being unclear. And so I watched my own video a couple of times again. And the only thing that I can think of that might have led someone to that conclusion would be that I used as an example, and this is all, if you follow the linearity of it, it all follows. As an example of my indictment of the media, I used the occasion of the town hall that Donald Trump was in. I can't remember her name. The woman in the white pantsuit was giving him these questions. It's sort of the simplistic binary of, don't you want the good guys to win and the bad guys to lose? And his response was, I just want people to stop dying. And of course, what he was indicating is that if he was in power, if he had his way, he would negotiate an end to that conflict. And my point was, and I made the point in the video, not that somehow it isn't a defensive war as the question was posed to me or anything about that. My point was that this response of Donald Trump's was touted by the media as being somehow controversial. That's my point. And I made the point in the video. And then I followed that up with more generalities, like if your leaders get you involved in anything other than a purely defensive war, they failed you, which I stand behind. In general, again, this is a 30,000 or maybe even a 60,000 foot view of kind of like the human experience, really. And I also said the citizens of one country generally never rise up and take up arms and storm the border and attack their neighbors, which I also stand behind, which is also generally true. It is the leaders who provoke, and it is the leaders who have other, the leaders of peripheral countries entirely that have their own geostrategic goals, and there are people who are non-state actors, right, that are probably the true rulers of all of us that have their own agendas and whatever. And of course, I didn't say all of that in the video, which makes that video even more general, right, because I'm expanding on it a little bit here. But the concept is a general one. I was not speaking of any specific conflict. I did not have any specific conflict directly in my mind when I was thinking those things and when I recorded the video. So this gets to something that is a big concern of mine, sort of socially and politically these days, which stifles communication and interaction. And that is the commandeering of intent. Now, this is like a small variant of that. And I'm not accusing these two guys of trying to manipulate me for political means or something like that, right? But I think it's a little bit of a kind of a modality that has permeated a lot of our communication, because I have an intent when I make a video. I have certain things that I'm thinking. And I have certain things that I want to convey. And then someone watches that, and through their own filters and biases and whatever, and motives perhaps, but I'm not saying that here, interpret that information in a certain way. And of course, that's fine. It's unavoidable. The more introspective and thoughtful among us might acknowledge their own biases and tendencies and whatnot. And I'm not saying that even wasn't done here, but probably not to a large degree. And understands that their interpretation may not be accurate. But what's happened here, I think, is that I've made a video with a certain intent. It's been interpreted a certain way. And then that interpretation has been applied to me, which then naturally follows that I'm being unclear or vague, like as though I'm trying to hide something or dance around something, but that is based entirely on your interpretation. And my evidence for that is that was not my intent. So you can take that or not. Again, both of these commenters have been with my channel for a long time, and I would think that by that they should know, I think I've generally been a pretty open guy. I think I approach YouTube sincerely. I don't have hidden agendas. And then to that end, I would ask, what is the actual point? I mean, I've got a pretty meager channel, right? So, and that's not a complaint. I haven't maintained the channel, but I don't have a lot of subscribers, and the subscribers that I do have generally don't watch my videos or comment. And then instead of engaging in some, really meaningful, cooperative, respectful discourse, I get that. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is a wiser man than myself might instead, employ an algorithm to look for the trending topics and get ChatGPT to draft up a script and get a bot to read the script and get a bot to compile some photos and then generate a eye-catching thumbnail in Midjourney and get 500,000 views in a month. A wiser man than myself might do that. And I don't know about you, but I'm seeing more and more and more of this. And it's a sea of nothingness. It's all necessarily derivative, right? No original thought, no genuine human communication, not even, there's lots of little science channels and stuff that I like to watch where, yeah, you never see the guy's face, the narrator, but he is a person or she, and you can tell they're a person, and they have, human faux pas, and they have an obvious personality that comes through, and more importantly, the video is made because they have a passion for a subject and they add something to the content, right? The purely science content that a person could just go seek out themselves, right? And this other stuff is not that. And I guess what I'm saying is, maybe it won't be too long that you won't have guys like me to worry about on YouTube anymore, right? It'll just be that. It'll be a sea of nothingness. Bunch of fake AI generated videos interspersed with a bunch of fake Elon Musk advertisements, right? Like, I don't know if you've seen that, but I get them all the time, and it's one of the most frustrating things. I want to like AI, because I view everything as a tool. And AI is certainly a great tool in a lot of respects, but, there's a lot of garbage involved there, and it's people chasing algorithms. And it works for them, at least at the moment. There's a lot of YouTubers that I really appreciate, and they bring a lot of value to the world, and they're just criminally undersubscribed, right? I think his name is Jameson Nathan Jones. Really great YouTube channel. He's a musician. He's classically trained, phenomenal keyboard skills, and he branched out into modular synth gear and whatnot, and he gives a lot of himself. And in terms of like teaching people, like for free online, right? Teaching them all kinds of things about technique and even some more peripheral issues to music production and whatnot. And like I say, criminally undersubscribed. And then you've got, not to wade into the Taylor Swift controversy, because I'm not. Let me be clear. The point is that here you've got someone like Taylor Swift, and I'm not sure if you're aware of this or not, but her music is all the same, right? It's a formula. Like all of it is a formula, and really adds nothing. And yet, not only is this person, of course, pushed upon people as being some sort of a pinnacle of something, and I get it, she's pushed at a certain demographic, but still, she doesn't stay in that demographic, right? Because this is what's available. Like people believe what they believe because they've been told to, and to a large degree, people watch what they watch because that's what's been presented to them. Most people are generally, I think, a little bit lazy when it comes to seeking content. They don't go try to find out, well, what is on the fringes? What might be the undiscovered talent out there, right? Most people just sit down in front of the box on the wall, and the box on the wall tells them what to think, and the box on the wall tells them what's good. So, and then, of course, then that popularity is manipulated, potentially, I think anyway, to political ends. So, getting back to the point, what really would be the point for me to make any meaningful commentary, right? Like, it's kind of a fool's errand, And I think a lot of it has to do with we've lost the ability to discuss complex topics like adults. And everything has been distilled down to these simplistic binaries. And just like, look around in nature, look around at, any political topic you like. There's no such thing. Like, that doesn't exist. It gets even more frustrating than that, because if you do try to engage with someone and talk to them about the nuances of a particular subject, they always come back to you with the simplistic binary and say, but, you're a Putin apologist, or something like that, right? And seemingly lost on people is the fact that two things can be true at the same time. And an indictment of one is not an exoneration of the other necessarily. And acknowledging some confounders in a specific situation does not exonerate the perpetrator of that situation. But what it might do is shed some light on some unrelated but kind of co-conspirators. Not in the invasion, let's say, in this case, you know, since I've been dragged into talking about a specific conflict, which was not my intent. That there are other motives at play here. And to understand the nature of this fucking beast that humankind seems to have been saddled with for an untold amount of time, and more importantly, an unimaginable amount of suffering, we have to understand all of the things at play. You know, you say you care about the Ukrainians, but I would submit to you that some of those Ukrainians that are no longer here with us would have preferred that a potential peace negotiation not be sidelined, because they might still be here to enjoy a beautiful morning sunshine like this. Okay, little buddy, let's go this way. Sorry, that's a little bit of a morning ritual I have. It's the path I used to walk my dog on, and he passed away in August. And so I say, because this is where we used to go to, and I would let him surf around the fields and smell everything and get in his morning ritual. And then I would, when it was time to go home, I would say, okay, little buddy, let's go this way. And of course, he wasn't little. That was my nickname for him. But anyway, that's kind of my point, right? Is that these are macro issues, because they permeate everything. And I could have just as easily used an example from the pandemic to illustrate my indictment of the media. This is the one I chose. I wasn't trying to talk about a specific conflict. And, you know, we could have real, I think, meaningful discussions about that stuff. And then I think, no, we probably can't, you know, and what value is there in it for me to even try? So I would submit to you that if you're thinking in those simple binaries, I think you're manipulable. If you're not aware of some of the confounding issues around something, and you're not aware of the desire of powerful people to move things around geopolitically, and even perhaps who view the entire human species except for themselves as useless eaters, etc., and see some of their global manipulations of people through, you know, the WEF and the WHO and all these big organizations to try to control and manipulate people. If you're not familiar with Agenda 21, which is old school now, right? Because it's Agenda 2030. If you were not aware of the Project for a New American Century and all of these documents, even if they are not, even you know, you don't have to say, well, that's what's behind 9/11, right? You don't have to say that. I'm not saying direct causal. I'm not saying global conspiracy necessarily, because I think sometimes all you need is a group of people with common goals and common values, and it's a de facto conspiracy. And sometimes they do say the quiet part out loud. you know, such as the aforementioned Project for a New American Century. You know, they wanted more military spending. They wanted a greater military budget. And how did they think they were going to have to go about that? Well, there would need to be some kind of a catalyzing and cataclysmic event. Something like a new Pearl Harbor. You know, speaking of Pearl Harbor, I'm just going to ramble till the end of the road. Fuck it. You know, might be one person left. Speaking of these issues, you know, this binary of winning and losing. Both my grandfathers fought in the Second World War, and I spent, of course, the majority of my young life not caring about that. And, you know, the more recent part of my life being, it's a potpourri here, a mixture of awe and horror and disgust and not shame, but some kind of an offshoot of shame, like in general, like human species shame and whatnot. And one of my grandfathers was a B-29 captain in the Pacific Theater, right? And so, you know, here's a guy who, you know, to think in terms of the binary, was doing his patriotic duty. He was quite an impressive man. He was an orphan. And he went from, you know, with determination and professionalism and grit and everything else, went from being an orphan to a captain of a B-29 and later a B-52 in the Strategic Air Command. Like, this is just a fucking impressive person. And the guy that I knew after he retired from the military, he wasn't tall in stature. He was relatively quiet, but he had certain ways of asserting himself that I realize now those were echoes of his, obviously, of his Air Force training and the discipline required to do what he did. But again, here's a guy coming from arguably the right side of history, doing his patriotic duty on the moral high ground, you know, and yet he spent the rest of his adult life quietly in torment. And he expressed that later in life. You know, his my uncle actually is my namesake. My uncle would take him out for breakfast or for lunch, and he would weep openly about the families that he firebombed to death in Tokyo, right? All the innocent people that are really, you know, we like to give numbers, casualties. Here's a number. Fuck the number. And you can imagine, you know, here's a guy who built his whole life to do something great, and he thought he was doing something great. And then after the war, he sits down at the table with his beautiful family, and they were a beautiful family. 9 children. Beautiful American spread laid out in front of him, you know. The bounty of whatever, American exceptionalism, whatever you want to call it. And his beautiful family. And then to have to realize how many families like that he probably wiped out. That's the winners, right? I don't think we should really ever forget. Nobody wins, man. You know? Isn't that the point? Nobody fucking wins. Somebody may win, you know. I don't know what their names are. They might start with an R or a G or a, you know, am I being vague? Am I being too vague for you? Or can you read between some lines? Can we have a real communication? Or are you gonna, you know, put things on me that that I never said, and then act as though I'm being deceptive or something, you know. I'm disinclined to play that game, you know. I got better things to do with my time than that. I don't know that I would, you know, necessarily get into a deep dive on any given political subject like that, like a very specific conflict. Some of it, yeah, sure, might be because I probably haven't researched any of it enough myself. Yeah, I mean, it's not that I don't. I think I research many of these topics enough to be as fluent as I needed to be for my own for my own ability to develop what I consider to be a reasonable position on that topic. And in any way, generally my position is this: I'm pro-peace. My heart goes out to any groups of people who are being attacked, encircled, deprived, having their food and water poisoned, etc., etc. And to the least amongst us goes my greatest compassion in that regard. And I have maybe even too much disdain, too much, maybe even hatred for the game theorists out there who are trying to figure out how to, maybe even Georgia Guidestones us all or something like that, right? And I'm even trying to work through that, because I'm not sure that hatred is a particularly helpful emotion in that regard. Like, I think in some ways it can be, but it tends to blind you, right? But I just don't know that there's any real win for me. There have been people, and I'm not saying this would happen to me, but of course there have been people who take their freedom of speech just a little bit too far, and suddenly, the authorities are visiting their door, or there's a group that they belong to that suddenly finds out, who they are, and somebody reports what they're saying, and suddenly you're ousted from this, or you lose your job, or whatever. I'm just, I would ask you, like, where's the upside? What would be the point? So, in some ways, and again, this was genuine. When I made the video, it was my genuine intent to talk about general concepts, which is what I did. And so that lays where it does. Would I want to make videos on more specific topics like this, where it appears to me that most people think in these simple binaries, and I'm just going to get a whole lot of grief over it, instead of any real kind of nuanced, complex conversation where we actually come to acknowledge some of what I see as the real truths of the matter, right? That in general, there are people, power brokers, that have many agendas, and you're not part of them. And that when we think in these simple binary terms, we are manipulable. I go on Facebook once in a while. I try to stay away from it, but a guy that I know down in Ohio had posted a meme, and another woman commented on it, and it was an odd comment, so I clicked on her thing, and it turns out her whole profile is wide open. Like, some people don't restrict their profiles, right? And it's just inception levels of virtue signaling profile pics all the way down. Like, just the ring around the head, every child matters, Black Lives Matter, I stand with Ukraine, I stand with the current thing, hug a nurse, I went to work so that, for you, please stay home for me. Just all the virtue but it's just, there's nothing else. The whole thing is just virtue signaling profile pictures all the way down with whatever the current thing is, going back years. And I think to myself, the people in power love to see that, because I think for most people what it means is you're probably not doing much else, and that includes thinking. I'll leave it there. Let me know what you think. Be gentle with me, Helen, okay? Because I think that I've been pretty sincere on this channel, and I don't particularly appreciate being accused of being vague or unclear. If you have a question, just ask me in a respectful way. Maybe we'll have that discussion. Maybe I will decline and say I'd rather not go into that, and that's my prerogative too. And everything online is sort of like pokes and jabs, and we don't treat people the way we would treat them if we were face to face. Maybe that's a way to turn this whole ship around, is if we all learned to treat each other better online and stop misusing the tool, as I used to say. Maybe that would have a spillover effect into real life. I don't know. Or maybe we'll all be wearing a metaverse headset soon. Have a good day.